Black Christians are the only group of people consistently claiming to hear God talk to them. You don't see this from white Christians in masses, Jewish people, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Asians, Latinos. Even Arab Christians don't speak like this. So the question is, why do Black Christians say, God told me, more than any other group? Step 1. The slave master's God had to speak directly to the slave. During slavery, Black people weren't allowed to read, think freely, or access African spirituality. So what did the colonizer do? Took away your language, took away your ancestors, and gave you a talking God who only speaks to you when you're hurting, hopeless, or lost. The only thing Black people were allowed to hear was the voice of a foreign God, not their ancestors, not their inner power, just their master's God. Step 2. The talking God is a program, not a miracle. When Black people say, God told me to quit my job, God told me to stay in my marriage, God said don't question the pastor, what they're doing is outsourcing their decisions to a mental voice created by 1. Fear. 2. Religious guilt. 3. Colonial conditioning. That voice isn't your creator. It's your conditioning. Step 3. The voice of God sounds just like the plantation. Let's think critically. That God you hear speaks English. That God always tells you to obey. That God says wait, suffer, and don't ask questions. That God gets mad if you think for yourself. Now ask yourself, why does the voice of God sound like a slave master? Step 4. Black people inherited a God voice through generational trauma. This is epigenetics plus indoctrination. You inherited the emotional trauma of slavery, and part of that was hearing a voice telling you, stay obedient, don't rebel, pray, not protest, accept your suffering. It'll be better when you die. White people didn't hear that. They gave you that voice. Step 5. No other race needs God to speak to them. Let's break it down. White people don't wait for a voice from heaven to start businesses. Asians don't hear a God in their head telling them what to do. Latinos rarely talk about hearing God directly. They honor saints, symbols, and culture. Even Arabs believe in divine will, but not as casual conversations with God. Only Black Christians claim this level of personal divine communication. But why? Because the system taught Black people not to trust their own mind, only to trust an invisible voice they didn't create. Step 6. God told me equals escaping accountability. Let's be real. Sometimes God told me is just a way to avoid being wrong, avoid making decisions on your own, justify bad choices, manipulate others. It becomes a coping mechanism, not a divine instruction. 7. God spoke to me. Unhealed trauma in disguise. Black Christians often say, God told me, in the middle of loss, struggle, confusion, depression, hopelessness. But if you study trauma psychology, you'll realize something. When the body is under extreme stress, the mind creates voices, visions, and illusions of hope to survive. So instead of seeking therapy, ancestral practices, or self-reflection, many Black Christians say, God spoke to me, because they were never given any other method to process pain. It's not spirituality. It's survival coping. 8. The voice you hear is just a mirror of the Bible. When Black Christians say they hear God, ask them what the voice sounds like. Is it angry? Is it judgmental? Does it sound like a pastor? Does it repeat Bible verses? Of course it does, because it's not God they're hearing. It's their own subconscious mind regurgitating scripture, fear, and sermons they've been programmed with since childhood. That voice doesn't speak from the cosmos. It speaks from the church pews. 9. Your God voice sounds like a colonizer, because that's who created it. Let's ask a bold question. If your God voice tells you to obey, be humble, forgive your oppressor, turn the other cheek, stay away from your ancestors, wait for heaven, whose agenda does that serve? Not yours, not your ancestors, not your freedom. It serves the Roman Empire, the church, and the colonizer who gave you that God. Because a God that tells you to think, rebel, and decolonize is dangerous to the system. But a God that keeps you docile, silent, and praying, that's a plantation God, not a creator. 10. If you had the power to hear God, why can't you hear your ancestors? Let's be brutally honest. If you believe spirits can talk to you, why does it only happen inside a religious script? Why is the voice always Christian coded? Why do you fear hearing your grandmother's voice, but not the voice of a sky god you never met? Because colonization trained you to fear your ancestors and worship your enslaver's deity. You don't have spiritual power. You have colonial programming dressed as prophecy. Final truth. If your God voice only sounds like the Bible, if your God voice only makes you passive, if your God voice never reconnects you with your ancestors, then you don't hear God. You hear the ghost of the slave master whispering in your subconscious. Black Christians don't hear God. They hear the echo of spiritual slavery. They hear the voice of obedience, guilt, fear, and mental programming passed down from chains to chapels. They hear the colonizer's voice in their own head and call it God. If your God only speaks when you're broken, only guides you into struggle, only tells you to obey, then that's not God. That's generational programming with a religious accent.